All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of the Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro Podcast. I am your host, Toby Passman. On the show with me today, we have a special guest, Kevin McCarney. Kevin spent several decades managing customer and employee relations across a wide range of industries and organizations. He's been a guest speaker at the USC Marshall School of Business, the UCLA Anderson School of Business, along with many others. A successful entrepreneur, speaker, mentor, husband, and father, Kevin has served on the board of directors of the California State Compensation Insurance Fund, the California Restaurant Association, the Burbank Arts in Education Foundation, the Boys and Girls Club of Burbank, and the Universal City North Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. And he recently came out with a book entitled Big Brain, Little Brain: How to Control Which One Speaks for You. And the book is an observational street psychology book, which we're going to get into today. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Toby. I really appreciate being here.
Awesome. Well, let's get into, tell me the inspiration behind the book. When did you have the idea that you wanted to write this book, and kind of what went into it?
I've been in the customer service business most of my life. I've been in the people business all my life. And I noticed different patterns from the time I was a kid in a big family of 9 people, the different ways my brothers would communicate, my sisters would communicate, and when I got into the workforce, the different way customers would communicate, the way coworkers would communicate. And I noticed, and I was working at the Grauman's Chinese Theater at the front door in the early 70s. And so I got a chance to observe large crowds and the way people interacted. And from there, I went on to Universal Studios as a tour guide. And it was a really nice job to have. But I noticed, because I'm speaking with people all the time and I'm listening to them, and I noticed this pattern of how even in the break room, things would escalate, between tour guides. There would be a conversation going, and I could even tell when it was going to escalate and when it was going to go bad, because it was reminding me of my brothers and my sisters when I was young. So I started recognizing this pattern of, oh, I can tell where that's going to go. And it was really a lot had to do with the tone of voice was one of the first indicators. And, I thought I knew everything about communicating and talking. And I was on a really hot day at Universal Studios. Trams were breaking down, 3-hour wait for the people. Tour guides, we're sitting in a nice, comfortable, air-conditioned room. I get a call on the loudspeaker, Kevin, tram on the right. It's a big group from Europe. They're really angry, and good luck. So I went out, and 3 cars, of tram, I'm trying to say hello to people. They got their arms crossed, they're folded. They're not looking at me. They're just upset. I get to my seat, and the head of the tour group grabs my arm and says, "Stop this, take us right to our bus. We don't want to do this anymore. Get us out of here." And I looked at him, I said, you're going to have a good time. Please just sit down, because we're going to start moving right now. And the driver heard me, and he started moving the tram right away. So the guy sat down, he says, "Okay, fine. Well, I'm going to sit here, but I am not going to have a good time. None of us are going to have a good time. Nothing you say is going to make us have a good time." And I said, okay. And I just started thinking, my snarky 19-year-old wanted to kick in and say, fine, I've got the microphone. You're with me for an hour and a half. So I was thinking, I'm just going to give the worst tour I possibly can. Then in the front row of the second car, I noticed a family from the Midwest had gotten stuck with this group from France. And they had big red t-shirts on for the football team that they supported there. And they had huge smiles on their face. They were so happy that the tram was moving. Oh my gosh, it was going. And I looked at them, and I went, in a split second, I went from being the snarky 19-year-old that wanted to get back at these people in the group for yelling at me, to I have got to please these 4 people in the front of the row of that second car, because they're here to have a good time. And so that's what I did. And I honestly didn't know I had that in me. I didn't know I could switch that quickly from being upset and wanting to get back at these people to somebody who wanted to take care of this people. And the amazing thing happened. while I was giving the tour to these 4 people, everybody else in the group came along and they started enjoying the tour like these 4 people, except for the leader. He still was a little grumpy. But what I noticed is by ignoring all the negativity around me, by ignoring the people who were upset and angry, and I focused only on those people that wanted to be there, everybody else came along. And at the end, there was a round of applause that I certainly did not expect. And they wouldn't stop thanking me at the end of the tour. And as I got off, which we typically do, and say goodbye to the people, I could see the family from the Midwest was waiting to speak to me. And I also could see in the very last car of the very last tram, one of my supervisors getting off the tram. This was a tour where I was being audited. They audit you to see how you're doing. So imagine if the 19-year-old snarky kid would have won that argument. And the family from the Midwest came up to me, and I'll never forget this. The father said, "You really turned that group around. They were not having a good time." I said, "You turned that group around. I got to see your smiles. Your smiles gave me the permission to completely forget all that and give you guys a good tour. I was going to choose to give a completely different tour." And the mother from the Midwest grabbed my shoulder. She said, "Well, this is the only time we're ever going to be in California. I just want to thank you for choosing to give us that tour because it made our vacation." And it's just as if I got hit in the face, like, what is she saying? I had no idea I had that kind of power or impact just with the way I responded to something. And so her words, "You chose," stuck with me. And I just have been on a mission ever since to try to figure out how we speak and how we react and the impact that it has on our lives. So, and that was the beginning of the book where I was just taking notes everywhere about these interactions. That was the beginning of the idea of the book.
And it sounds like with that case, you really kind of figured out, I guess, the power of kind of being able to redirect your attention from because both of those, the individual who was giving you a hard time, along with that family who was visiting, they were both, there on that bus. But what changed, it seems like, is your focus was all at first, how can I kind of get back at this guy that's giving me a hard time, and then then your brain sort of you were able to sort of redirect that attention to the family and end up giving a great tour. So it sounds
Yes.
like kind of redirecting attention and focus seems like a maybe a big lesson there.
Well, it was a major lesson for me, but the real lesson for me that I didn't understand when she said it's the only time she's ever going to be in California. And what I could have done, I could have destroyed their vision of this great company, great tour. I have having lots of fun working there. I could have destroyed that for this couple just because I wanted to get back. And I think one of the things that I talk about in the book, we get into these get back loops sometimes where we're having a conversation and somebody says something and we say, "No, that's not it." And we go round and round, and it's not about solving the issue we're talking about. It's just about getting back at somebody for saying something. And I talk about that a little bit, these get back loops. And it was pretty obvious to me that everywhere in life, we have these traps that we can fall into if we're not careful. And I know this is, street language when I'm talking about this stuff, but it really comes down to what's taking over. And I was never very much into science or neurological stuff. But as I began to give presentations, because I wrote a book in 2011, the original one, and I was giving presentations on the concept of big brain, little brain, because what I delved into was what's happening inside, what is making me able to choose in a split second, as you pointed, redirect and change my focus from something that was so negative to something that was actually quite positive. And so I wanted to teach other people how to do this. I went to Universal Studios. I got through there, and I went into the restaurant industry as a trainer and a corporate trainer. And I noticed, one of the things in training is you really have to get people to understand what you want them to know. And it's not, you can't just tell them what, you have to tell them, you have to infuse why. You have to let them know why this has to be done, because then they believe it. And it's every time the situation comes up, they'll know why they have to respond in a certain way. And in the restaurant business, you know, the corporate world, a lot of their training was checking boxes. Okay, we're going to have a training on this, check that box. We're going to train on this, check that box. But to me, training was more of not an event as much as the event was planting the seed. And then you nurture the information that you gave out at that event, and to make sure that it sticks, and the people growing with the company grow with that. And so as I became a trainer, started doing this, I noticed this pattern established itself where I could see where things were going negative and where they were going positive. So I just kept taking notes on that. It was satisfying for me, because I was really trying to help my team deal with different situations. In the restaurant business, we are essentially dealing with people with low blood sugar. By the time they get to us, they're very hungry, right? So if you mess up that order, it's more than just messing up that order and giving them the wrong item. They're physiologically in a state of mind where they've been thinking about that burrito or whatever it is for the last 2 hours, and they get there and all of a sudden they got something wrong, and they would overreact. So during this time, as I saw this people overreacting as much as they were, I had to teach my team how to deal with people in that frame of mind, which I labeled little brain, because it's kind of I label this as sort of the neocortex against the reptilian brain, kind of fighting over the emotions of the limbic system, without getting into too much science of the brain, because I really wanted to make it more about the conversational language where everything starts. Everything starts with a conversation. And so it's our ability to manage our emotions and ourselves in that conversation that pushes us forward. And from a customer service standpoint, we're in a different conversation every 3 to 5 minutes with somebody, and we have to make sure that it's going in the right direction. One of the things we talk about in the book is this concept that I was giving a presentation to a business group on a Monday about big brain, little brain, and how to use it in customer service. And then Wednesday, I was giving a presentation that I'd been doing this for 3 years to a group that had been in a professional program coming out. They were coming out of prison, and they were teaching these guys and girls, men and women, culinary skills so they could get a job as a prep cook. They asked me to come in and train them how to handle the pressure of the kitchen in the heat of the moment. And things are going to go wrong in the kitchen. Things will always go wrong in the kitchen at some point. There's a lot of stuff going on. Something's going to happen. So my job was to sort of help them understand that when something goes wrong, it's not like any other environment they've been in. It's not a reaction environment. It's a responding environment. And they needed to take some time. And what was fascinating, I noticed that same people in the business group, the same eyes, that some people really understood the concept right away and got it. Others were having difficulty. As the people that were just coming out of prison was doing the same thing. Some people really got it right away. And I realized there needed to be a bridge between little brain and big brain. There needed to be something or a place where people could go momentarily, and I mean momentarily, so that they didn't let little brain take over and say what it shouldn't say. And so the bridge that I created was this thing called neutral, where I call it a portal to the big brain, where if you can't think of what you want to say right away, at least get to neutral. It gives you a split second or a little bit of time to sort of pivot, to sort of redirect, and at your point. And from that point, you can rebalance yourself and say, what's the best thing I should say for this particular moment? How do I go? So neutral immediately caught on, and every group, that's what their favorite tool is and I give them, I had to give them something when they went to neutral and just said, just go to neutral. That wasn't good enough. So we give them a whole list of different things they can do, neutral words that they can use to signal to themselves. Don't let little brain take over here. Don't let little brain get control, because if you get like a mnemonic phrase like, okay, some of this comes from my own life where, I'm in the restaurant business myself. I've been opened my own first restaurant 37 years ago. I'm still in the business, and unfortunately, I'm still in the business. Very fortunately, and I think we'll see where the next years take us. But I was having a very long day. I came home around 8 o'clock at night. I'm, literally been up for 16 hours, and I want to go and just relax and take it off. And I walk in my house, and my daughter's high school something called show choir, which I know a lot more about now than I did then. All of a sudden, there's 50 kids in my house singing at the top of their lungs. So I walk in, I went, okay, what do we got here? What's going on? And instead of, where sometimes you get surprised and you say the wrong thing, or you just go into that, what I call the little brain emotional phrase, where you just want to be upset or angry. And that does absolutely no good in the moment. And it has a long impact if you say the wrong thing at the wrong time.
So it sounds like going back to your point on explaining neutral, it sounds like neutral is a much more kind of logical perspective or way of reacting rather than maybe the first sort of impulse, kind of emotional based reaction. Is that kind of
It's kind of a way station to get to that smarter response. I break it down into reaction being the little brain and response being the big brain. Response indicating that maybe you've given a little more thought about what you're going to say, and reaction where you're just impulsive and you just do it right away. The little brain I label as something that it's careless, it's sarcastic, it's snarky, it's all the things that we think are going to be funny or we think we have a right to say. And the big brain is instead is going to be more nurturing and empathetic and really beginning to understand. And the idea is to break it down into something simple so that people that I'm training can understand it. I want to make it accessible to them, because in some ways we all know this. This is the right, but sometimes the is hard to find. And in the pressure of the moment, when the pressure is on, when you get surprised or you get there's something happening that you weren't expecting, that pressure is when a lot of people drop into little brain and they say something they regret. You see it a lot of time in the news, people apologizing all the time for something they said because of whatever state of mind they were in. But the idea is that even though we know this, we know academically, and we know really what we should be saying, in the pressure of the moment, we forget. And so the idea behind big brain, little brain was to give people a set of tools where it would help them remember what they needed to in the pressure of the moment, so that they would be more in control of what they were going to say, ultimately in control of the ripple effect that our words have and our responses have in different situations.
And in the bio I was reading regarding big brain, little brain, I was seeing that it said that big brain, little brain identifies the 21 tools your big brain can tap into for better communication, as well as the 14 avoidable traps that your little brain will constantly set for you. So can you kind of tell me about some of those tools? I guess starting with some of the tools that you can kind of use to tap into the big brain, and then also if we could talk about some of the avoidable traps that the little brain sets for us.
Absolutely. I break the book down into two parts. The first part of the book is basically the concept that we just talked about. The second half of the book is the 7 different principles that I've broken things out in, so it would be easier to understand. And the first one is control. We have control. There's tone, there's words, there's time, responsible, power, and awareness. All different arenas of communication. But in control, that's where neutral words come in. If you can get your neutral words in time, or you say a neutral word and it prevents you from saying something, that's definitely a tool. And the other one is, one of the tools there is slipping the punch, where let's say you're in a situation where it's a baseball game is a pretty good example. And you have fans screaming and yelling, very emotional. Sometimes alcohol has played a lot into that emotion at a baseball game, and you have people screaming and yelling, and you're wearing the opposing team's uniform or the hat or something, and they're screaming and yelling obscenities or whatever. The idea is sometimes in martial arts, I think there's a thing called slipping the punch. right? Which is your opponent's coming at you full force. You just step to the side and let them go by. And then you can rebalance yourself and decide how you're going to respond. It's the same thing with communication. If you have somebody saying something that's an affront or just, and it's really not a full-on pre-planned debate or something, but if there's something on the street, somebody say something, let it go, because it's slipping the punch really helps you not jump into a lot of problems. You see so much on the news media today with people in just everyday situations escalating it into something bigger and much bigger. And we look at this and go, oh my gosh, they were just talking. It was just in a restaurant. They were just at a train station. And all of a sudden it escalates, and it starts with a conversation, because if you don't have control of the conversation, I know that a conversation can escalate. And again, when you get instigated by a comment that somebody makes, the idea is it really worth fighting? Is it really worth the anger? Is it really worth the negative feedback? The other ones we have is one of the tools is time parachutes. Again, these are the big does, but it's really important to have. A time parachute is just, you're under pressure, somebody's asking you something, somebody blindsides you with a question in the middle of a conference room, and you feel like ambushed. So you just, sometimes, and I give a couple different examples where you can just say, you know what, I'm gonna have to give that a little bit more thought. Now, some of these words I can do so quickly, but we all grow up with different communication skills. And in a lot of ways, if we have good communicators around us, we'll have these good communication skills. But a lot of people grow up in so many different areas and so many different backgrounds. Not everybody has learned these simple little communication skills. So time parachutes is one of them, where you just give yourself a little more time. Somebody's pressing you. You know what? Let me think about that. Oh, I haven't thought about that. I'm going to ponder that a little bit more. Just giving yourself that extra little bit of time. Again, it plays into the neutral part of that. Then, and the other one is, this is a big one. Good gossip. We know what gossip does. We know what gossip kills the culture of an organization. It's silent. It's like a silent cancer that begins to weave its way through the organization because it's a rumor or something that starts. And you know that eventually everybody's going to hear it. So I had some people working for me. I had a great chef and terrific manager, and all of a sudden they weren't getting along. They're not talking to each other. And I couldn't understand. And Patty, my partner in the business with me, we've been together for over 30 years now. And I said, I don't understand. They what happened? Couldn't get to the bottom of it, but I began to understand that they weren't communicating at all, and I didn't want to lose either one of them. So we called the manager into the office, and we talked to him. We said, okay, you got a meeting tomorrow. She's not going to be there. Your chef's not going to be there because she's got a family function. You're going to go through the meeting, and I want you to think of 3 things that she does incredibly well. He said, well, I can think of 3 things she doesn't. I said, yeah, I got that. Okay. Now, think of 3 things she does incredibly well. Okay, fine. Tomorrow, and when you finish all your key points of the meeting, your numbers, and at the end, I want you to highlight the 3 things that she does really well. So she's not here right now, but I just want to highlight 3 things. I have to be honest, because if it's not honest, it won't work. So he finishes the meeting. He goes, yeah, just want to say that, she's always here on time. She's really good with the customers. They love her because she's been around a long time, and she's impeccably dressed. She's always in uniform like that. And that's how we ended the meeting. 24 hours later, not even 24 hours later, he walks in the next morning, and from a corner of the kitchen that doesn't usually go over to, he hears, "Good morning, Robert." And he turns around and says, "Good morning, how are you?" So I'm fine. Listen, and it was just all of a sudden, whatever rumor had been out there, whatever division had there, in 24 hours, she had heard that he said something nice about her when she wasn't there. And that was a strategic move from a conversational standpoint, where we realized, and I didn't even, with the potential of this, we realized that saying something nice behind somebody's back travels the same path as gossip. So we called it good gossip. And if you say something nice when somebody's not there, it does so many different things. Your entire team begins to trust you more because they're thinking, oh, he's saying something nice when somebody's not here. And in management circles, when you're talking about different things, how many times are you dealing with an assistant manager or manager that has done just the opposite? And you're dealing with the consequences of that. So good gossip is one of those tools that we talk about. And I'll give a couple of stories in there about how it really plays out. And what you notice too is that it's all about trust when it comes to leadership. And if you can talk nice about somebody, even if they know you're not necessarily the best of friends, but you can say something nice about them, honestly, when they're not there, it sends a very big message that people can trust you. And it's turned out really, really well for us. I don't know, I can go through a whole list here because there's 21 of them, but that's for the positive ones. The negative ones, or the traps, is tone and when you're in escalation. Conversations start, I think confrontations start because the conversation's allowed to get out of control, because it's allowed to escalate. And the first indicator is tone. And one of the things that we talk about is that the tone is the message, because even before we know what a word means with our parents, we know what their tone means. We know if they're afraid, we know if they're upset, before we have any idea of the vocabulary. And we never lose that ability to separate the tone from the words. So, and the tone is an immediate indicator, and it's a good read of people and what the frame of mind they're in. If it's an emotional frame of mind or whatever, we know by their tone kind of where they're at. So if you can read the tone and understand the tone, just don't let it escalate. But that's a trap. And lots of times people try to out-tone each other. Well, I got up to hear this level of tone, and you try to up that level of tone, and it escalates everything into the wrong direction. I think the other thing is, I think one of the things when it comes to time is ambushing people, waiting until Friday afternoon at 4:00 and say, by the way, I need this on Monday, or you're walking out the door in the morning, and all of a sudden you tell your kids or tell your wife, oh, by the way, and it's oh, by the way, and we're not going there tonight, we're going here. That kind of ambushing creates a perfect scenario for little brain to take over and create problems. So ambushing on time is critical. So you're planning things out and not waiting until the last minute to say something or do something or manipulate the moment like that. Then I think one of the other ones under awareness is assuming the negative. Lots of times when we don't have all the information, we assume. So if somebody says something or somebody does something, or if you get a text from somebody and you don't understand the reason for the text or even the tone of the text, we assume. We automatically assume a tone for that text or for that email. And if you've ever gotten a long-winded email from somebody where you go, what were they thinking? And you want to assume the negative that, oh, they were in this frame of mind, when you talk to them on the phone, it had nothing to do with that. I think, is it Keen and Peele had a really good show about the two guys texting each other back and forth and getting upset and angry with each other until they actually saw each other and realized it had nothing to do with their text. Their text is not a good representation of communication. It's information, but it's not a great tool for communication in most arenas. Let's see, I'll leave you also with, I call them gossip bullies. People that gossip about others. That's a trap, and from my perspective, it's, if you hear somebody gossiping about somebody else, the trap is to repeat what they said instead of ignore what they said. Don't pass on, don't give that rumor or gossip any more room to grow. And so what we can do is we can add is that filter where if somebody's gossiping, we're not repeating it. We're not going to say what it is because it doesn't really serve the organization well. And with all this stuff, it really comes down to, we're all in the same organization. We're all in the same boat, so to speak. But it really comes down to understanding that whatever we say, everybody's eventually going to hear it. Everybody's going to hear everything. I mean, if anything, the last decade has taught us is that no matter what you said, when you said it, it's going to be out there. And so, in a company standpoint, even in a family standpoint, you know that if you can control what you're saying, and it doesn't mean you have to be thinking about it every second. You just have to learn these little techniques to sort of make sure you're nudging yourself in the right direction. It's not and if you say something wrong, if you do an oops, I call it an oops, there's apologies. I think I'm more comfortable if I forget something, if I say something wrong or inappropriate, it's an apology. There's no expiration date on an apology. You can say that 3 years later, 5 years later, 8 years later. I've got brothers that, they're apologizing to me for something when I was 10, right? So, there's no expiration date. And what's amazing is there's actually industries set up for the concept of apology, right? There's flowers, there's greeting cards, there's all these different industries set up, and you have different signals of, oh, I shouldn't have said that, I'm sorry. And taking responsibility is one of the 7. It really gives people a chance to trust you more when you can take responsibility and if you need to apologize. So we identified different things throughout the book about different techniques, different things you can use. And it's one of those things that I've been taking notes for so many years. And at one point, I just took over my entire living room, every square inch, with 3x5 cards, notes, and started figuring out, okay, these are all my notes, and what does it mean? And eventually it turned into a book.
Kevin, going back to one of the things you had mentioned regarding tone, I want to ask you. So you kind of talked about in order for kind of a conflict to escalate, the tone keeps kind of the two people kind of escalate the tone. So I would assume kind of the counterbalance to that would be if you were in a discussion, maybe it goes into an argument, but I would assume if you're able to kind of maintain a level tone despite while you're discussing kind of heated topics, does that kind of diffuse the situation or at least prevent it? Because if it seems like it takes 2 to tango, in the sense of if the other person starts kind of raising their voice and yelling at you, but you just continue talking calmly, like they're not going to be able to, if you're not like meeting them at that same energy level, it seems like they're going to kind of just diffuse naturally.
You're absolutely right. And thank you for pointing that out, because that's exactly what you need to do. If you don't follow them into little brain, if you don't follow them into that tone, then they'll have to come back to your tone. And that's one of the things that we've done in our business for so long. We had somebody come in to one of the restaurants, ordered some enchiladas with a friend, and delivered them about 5 minutes later to her. She comes back up to the counter, literally 6 or 7 minutes later, slams them on the counter in the restaurant that only seats 50 people, out as loud as could possibly be. "These enchiladas are cold!" Screaming them out. The tone was through the roof. And the manager, to his credit, looked at her and said, "You know what? I am so sorry. I can't believe that happened. I'm going to go make you some enchiladas myself. I'm going to bring them out. They're going to be great. You're going to love them. I'm so sorry." She goes and sits down, make the enchiladas, brings them out. She comes back up 5 minutes later, slams them out again, pointing fingers. "You made these enchiladas cold again." And realizing that it really wasn't the enchiladas. The manager was really sharp, and he said, "Look, I can't apologize enough. Let me do something. Let me get you something else on the menu, anything at all you want, and it'll be on me as well as the enchiladas. Just want to make you happy today." "Fine, fine. Give me some of those taquito things." And he does. And about 10 minutes later, he looked over and she'd barely taken a bite of the taquitos. So he's getting worried. He's got a line to the door. All of a sudden, he feels a hand on his arm. It's the lady. So he looks at him and she says, "Thank you." And he looks at her and he goes, "So you like the taquito?" And she says, "Oh, no, thank you for not being angry at me. I just came back from the hospital. My husband's not doing well. I haven't slept in days. I haven't eaten. I didn't mean to take it out on you. And he said, she says, just thank you for handling it the way you did. And so they changed a hug and pleasantries, and she went off. Two people sitting really close to the counter came up to the manager afterwards and says, listen, we knew something wrong with her, but the way you handled that situation made us feel comfortable because he could use the right tone. He brought her back. He didn't escalate it. He didn't try to win the argument by showing her a temperature gauge that the enchiladas were on. He didn't try to win that argument. He was trying to win her back. And he did. And he also won the other customers there that were watching this whole thing happen. Your ability to maintain the right tone and to really, as you put it so well, keep that lower tone to kind of bring people back to your tone is critical. And it's so instrumental today because you see everybody feeling, oh, I'm triggered, so I have a right to say that. And it's really not true. I use the word activate because activate means, yes, you might be a little upset, but you haven't said anything yet, haven't done anything, which I think triggers sometimes make people feel like, oh, I'm triggered, so I that's just the way it is. No, I think activate, you're still the responsibility in that moment to take charge and take control before you allow yourself to say something wrong or do something wrong.
Kevin, how would do you feel like it's like the different sort of the I guess the different factors that sort of affect sort of the way we're able to show up and whether we kind of act more out of that big brain or little brain? Like I would think sleep would be a big one, as far as if someone is really sleep deprived, they're more likely to be kind of impulsive. Same with if someone's drinking. I mean, when I heard you describe little brain, the first thing that came to mind was someone intoxicated on alcohol, is someone who just kind of blurts out whatever is on their mind. They're not really able to restrain, what they're saying. So I would think there's some different factors that would probably affect, whether someone's able to act from their big brain or little brain.
You hit it right on the head so well. I mean, that's just perfect because one of the things we talk about at the very front of the book is influences and being under the influences, which is similar to alcohol in a way, but there are other influences. You hit a big one, and that is sleep. Sleep is a physiological thing. If you're injured, if you're hurt, if you've got a sore foot, if you're not feeling well, that's an influence. And maybe not as powerful as alcohol, but it's an influence. The other one is hunger. Hunger is an influence. When people are hungry, people that, the influence in their life, if they've got something going on at work where somebody got through yelling at them, because they didn't get a project done on time, or at home, if somebody hasn't done their chores, or, I think in a lot of situations, money is a big stress point. So somebody has a lot of financial issues going on, they could actually be influenced by that. Maybe not to the same level as alcohol, because alcohol is certainly one of the key factors. And, we moved 8 times before I was 11. 5 different houses, 3 different motels. We were always moving. My father was very good friends with bottles of alcohol that had friendly names, but they weren't friendly names. And so I got very familiar with that concept and how it worked. Mostly I got familiar with moving around a lot to different places and realizing that I had to learn to read people before I could ever learn to read a book. And so that was maybe the original genesis of my observational ability, because I was the youngest of 5 boys and then we had 2 girls. But the idea is, anytime somebody is drinking, what's the first thing, what's your first indicator? They start talking louder. They start talking louder and they can't hear as well, and they get more animated. And so you can begin to see immediately. But those same influences or other influences in our life are very similar to alcohol. Alcohol maybe is a faster indicator and a faster channel to little brain, because I've seen so many different people in so many different situations go through this where they don't realize, and I'm helping friends that have come out of alcohol addiction and friends who have just stopped drinking because they realized it was just taking over their lives to some point. But some people have no problem. A couple drinks here, a couple drinks there. Not everybody the case, and depends upon what's going on in their life. If they're using it as a crutch, if something else is pushing them into more than they normally would. But it obviously the physiological component is there. But I try to keep everything in the book on the conversational level and the everyday communication level. I know there's deeper components of all of this that we can go into, and I really think that it's important that people for the book, I want them to feel like it's easy access. It's simple. I try to make it as I try to distill all the complicated jargon down to simplicity so they could keep it, remember it, and use it right away. Because I know half this book really well. Big brain, little brain, and I know half. So I'm working on the other half. I think we're all working on the other half.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, what sort of projects do you envision yourself writing more books, or working to sort of teach the concepts from this book in other ways, or like kind of what's next for you?
Thank you. I definitely am going to be writing more books, but more specified venues like Big Brain, Little Brain retail, Big Brain, Little Brain parenting, and Big Brain, Little Brain youth sports. Because if you want to see Little Brain in action, go to a youth sports game, and it won't be the kids. So, there's so many different arenas where people need to identify some of the little traps that they're falling into and find out some of the different tools they can use in that particular arena and that thing. And I'm also, I work with another group where we're trying to get people to realize that it's not a person who's big brain or little brain. It's their words or their actions. So you can, no matter where somebody is on the spectrum of thinking or wisdom, I think no matter where they are, they can grow and they can evolve and they can come back. So to me, it's really about that growth potential that everybody has. Nobody is big brain. Nobody is little brain. Some of our actions, some of our words, but we all have a chance to grow. We all have a chance to participate in the growth of all this. And I think that getting people to listen and getting people to be more friendly in their own communication, their own lives is just the beginning of that.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. I really enjoyed talking about all these different concepts. If the listeners want to find out more about your work or connect with you, where would you direct them to?
Go to bigbrainlittlebrain.com. There's an email there if you want to email me directly. I respond to my emails personally. And I appreciate it if there's any comments people have to make, when they're reading the book, send me the comments. One of the things that I'm going to be asking people for is we all have our own neutral words already. So we don't always look at them as a tool. But I'm asking people in the starting, send me your neutral words. Let's put a list of neutral words together, make it easier for people to find these. So that's the fun part. If you want to go there and do that, have fun. And I can't thank you enough, Toby, because this is such an intelligent podcast with you that I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for your kind words. Absolutely. One quick question that just came to mind when you were talking about neutral words, in terms of communication, like how much would you say, words come into play versus the tone that you say those words in when it comes to, being able to act from the little brain versus big brain?
I think the tone is so powerful. I think having the words, and even one of the things I talk about is practicing your neutral words in front of a mirror, practicing that tone so that you can get used to saying it like that. So you can use to saying, okay, or I see that, or wow, I had no idea. You practice it in a genuine way to where it sounds so natural when you say it. Because if you can practice those words, then the tone and the words come together. And that coming together will really help. But to your point, tone is probably the most significant, and I still believe the tone is the message. It's the beginning component of people understanding what that moment is all about.
Great. Great. Well, for those listeners who enjoyed the show, go ahead and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're Roscoe's Wetsuit. You can also find audio versions of the Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro podcast available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and just about anywhere else that audio podcasts are available. Kevin, again, I wanted to really thank you for your time today. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Toby, thank you so much. What a great conversation.